the stressful things creep in little by little until you explode. And over time, we're not aware of how stressed we are. And so then we just seek to numb the pain or numb the stress with things that are actually making us more stressed. I had a major problem, and it was driven by anxiety. And I took every sleeping pill. I'm putting a Band-Aid on. This was a bigger issue that I had to kind of solve systemically for myself. This is burnout. I'm causing this myself. No one else is making me do anything. It's all me. And realizing I got to take responsibility. I don't want to blame somebody else, but I just wasn't as aware as I'd like to be. Some people don't even know what their values are. They haven't slowed down enough to okay, these are my values. This is what's really important to me, and write them down. If you don't know where you're going, you can go anywhere. What is it that you're trying to get to? Meanwhile, being totally satisfied in the present moment, knowing that it's all about the journey. I think about death a fair amount, not in a morbid way, but this is all going to end. I don't know when. I don't want it to end right now, but if it ends right now, I'm ready for it. I'm not scared of it.
I have Ben with me, who runs the number 8 team in Florida. He's the sports and entertainment director. He's a father of 2 amazing kids, husbands, and I could go on with his list of accolades, working with 600 athletes, celebrities, and finding flow state between life, business, being able to travel and work from Vermont for 4 to 5 months, but then still have time to meditate, have time for family, and still run a successful team. Thanks for coming on, Ben.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you, Andrew, and I like the fact that we're both wearing V-necks.
Yeah,
V-neck guys.
Matching.
That's right.
I tend to wear V-necks pretty often. So.
Me too, man. Me too.
So
great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So I could go on about the list of stuff that you've done, and everybody can see the success that you've had. But I was curious, I'm sure you weren't always living in this stress-free, zen, successful lifestyle. So what context would I have to know about your earlier life that built who you are today?
Well, I've studied a lot of Eastern philosophy and Buddhism and stuff, and one of the 4 noble truths as prescribed by the Buddha is, suffering is part of life. So then if you follow the path of those 4 noble truths, then you start realizing, okay, well, I have to accept that. And I've done plenty of suffering. And so going through the that progression, it's okay, well, I accept it. And then I want to basically not suffer,
Yep.
And so I think at the point now, just to kind of get to the end state, is when suffering is you allow it to happen, right? You can't control things that come into your life, and you don't have to suppress. I was very good at suppressing emotions and feelings and all that kind of stuff. I don't think I'm a super emotional guy to begin with, but I was very good at suppressing all that stuff. And I'm not talking about suppressing, right? So what I'm saying is recognize the thing that happened, and then you can quickly reframe, so a lot of where I go is gratitude. Okay, man, I didn't like this thing that happened. I feel the thing, and actually because I've been doing so much personal development work and meditation, all these things, I actually feel it more now than I did before. And in some ways that's inconvenient to go into those feelings. But then you realize through doing this work and being on this path that, no, that's cool. That's good. This is just the roller coaster of life, man. I'm just here. I can't control any of this stuff and get out of my own head. And okay, how can I reframe this? Where's the opportunity to grow from it, to learn from it? Why are we here if we're not here to just grow? Are we just playing a video game all day and drinking a beer, watching football? We're not growing when we're doing that. It's great to do those things, right? There's a time and a place for those things. But, when you meditate, it's okay, that's great. But the rest of the time that you're awake, you're not meditating. But how do you take meditation in action? So how do you deal with the things as they arise? And then they arise and they pass. They arise and they pass. And they arise and they pass. And you just realize that. So no matter what the thing is, you don't get an attachment to it. And so anyway, I could go on, but I'll stop there.
No, that's good. So, because I know my very first business that I actually had to open an office, and it was this kind of summer internship. It was the first time I pulled out all of my money from all of my birthdays, from stocks, bonds, and my parents were like, "Why are you doing this? Why are you pulling out money?" Because they came from corporate lifestyle, stuff like that. And so I put all this money into this business, and it got to this point where I was basically like sleeping on like a mattress, uh, spending a lot of time in the office, and I was teetering between $0 and $100 in the bank account. And you mentioned this point of like suffering. I was curious, was there like a pivotal point, in your life that kind of that change happened? Like, I think Tony Robbins talks about it, where it's like you reach this like disgust, and you're like I've had enough.
I think there have been many. I think one of them that pops to mind first is actually when I discovered meditation. Like that was the first thing. I was not trying to be more spiritual or more zen-like or more mindful, none of that stuff. I was trying to solve a problem, which was I couldn't sleep. And as you know, as a foundational habit, I mean, if you're not getting a good night of sleep, you can't exercise. You're not cognitively where you want to be. You're not going to be the best person, the best, friend or spouse or anything. Like you are not showing up as your best self. And I knew I had a major problem, and it was driven by anxiety. And I took every sleeping pill. I took, started taking Xanax on. Okay, man, I haven't slept well in a couple nights. Like I really got to take some Xanax tonight so I can sleep well. So like every 3 nights, I would take some Xanax or half a tab. I'm like, what am I doing? Like I'm putting a Band-Aid on something, and a Band-Aid is fine sometimes, but this was a bigger issue that I had to kind of solve systemically for myself. And so, yeah, so I learned to meditate, and I discovered that, and I said, okay, let me see if this works. And I started doing it in the mornings, and lo and behold, with some consistency, like I started sleeping, and I wasn't waking up in the night and having that issue. So I think that was one thing. And then another thing was just looking back over the years in real estate and realizing, man, I'm going through these cycles of burnout. And like, why is it that every beginning of every year, I put all this pressure on myself? And, like my wife would tell you, I'm no longer like that, but like probably wasn't like the best expression of myself in like January and February, because I'm like, all right, I got these fixed expenses as a realtor. I got to take care of this. I'm not making any money until I get to this point. Now I can chill out. Like, why am I doing that to myself? Like, this is burnout. I'm causing this myself. No one else is making me do anything. It's all me. And, realizing I got to take responsibility. I don't want to blame somebody else, but I just wasn't as aware as I'd like to be. And anyway, I started becoming more aware, and like, so, these are two different moments that I mentioned. And sometimes the awareness happens in an instant.
Yep.
It's like years in the making, and then it culminates in a moment, like as you mentioned. And sometimes we just have to how do we create more awareness of, the patterns in our life that we can disrupt, that are removing energy from us, and how do we create more patterns, new neural networks and pathways to create better patterns, i.e. habits, right? Like it all ties down to habit formation in my mind. So I love all the habit stuff because, over the years, it's like, you don't change your life. You don't do a 180 overnight. It takes years, but you do like these little micro, adjustments, if you will, throughout the course of life. And like, I'm 15 years later after discovering meditation, I look back and I'm like, oh shit, like, yeah, I'm happier, I'm healthier, I'm making more money, I'm in better shape. Like I'm a better spouse, I'm a better father. So it's not mutually exclusive. All these things, the flywheel of all these things kind of goes together. But yeah, it's painful. And there's been lots of suffering along the way. And then getting back to that is like, okay, how do I suffer less? How can I make better decisions? And it's a journey. So
Yeah, it's all kind of, if life were a big thread, we just keep adding threads together that kind of build us to who we are like today. And I want to kind of take a step back on that and get a little context of like, where were you in life and business when that moment came where you're anxious, and when you first learned meditation? What point were you at?
yeah, I think it was 29, to be specific about it. And I got into this business in my mid 20s. I was in commercial real estate office leasing, and like had a pretty successful first 5 years of my 20s. And then I walked away from that because I was really bored. I was like, I can't do this the rest of my life. And similar to your parents, like my dad was corporate, was a university professor basically. And I told him, yeah, Dad, I'm going to go, get into residential real estate and start this company, which is what I did. Had never sold a house before, but long story, but my ex-wife, we were boyfriend, girlfriend at the time, and we'd been together for a while, and I was helping her start a company, and I was going to go join her in that venture. So she had been selling some residential real estate, but He's like, "You're crazy. What are you doing?" I was making 3 times as much money as he'd ever made at like 25 years old. So like I was walking away from something that was like beyond my dreams that I would have been at when I graduated from college, that I would be making this kind of money. And in some ways I thought I was a little crazy, but I think when you recognize within yourself, like I've always had this kind of inner sense, like I'm going to be successful no matter what. I don't know exactly how it's going to turn out, but it's just going to happen. Like I always had that confidence, that inner confidence. And so the anxiety was just, I think, driven because I'm a type A, and I'm just a more naturally anxious person. Some people live more in the past, whatever. Like for me, that wasn't the problem. The problem for me was like always trying to control. I have a control issue, right? That's one of my triggers with my kids, right? Like I want to control. Kid hasn't listened to me for 5 times. Slater, put on your shoes, put on your shoes, put on your shoes. Okay, now I'm getting pissed, right? So it's like it's my control trigger. Like he's distracted, he's reading a book, whatever. There's other ways that I could communicate more effectively to a 7-year old, sometimes than so just realizing that. But so I think it was just anxiety, kind of eating me up. And it wasn't that I had $100 in the bank. I mean, I was very fortunate that I had, it wasn't a financial thing, but I was like, where's my next deal coming from? Or just the mind racing, and it just kind of goes on from there.
Did you have any like good lessons from having that early success? Like, I'm sure being in a lot of different sales fields, you can have this early success where you might not be there mentally, but then you get that success, and that success starts to pull you down, and you have to pull yourself back up. Like, okay, I have to get my headspace right. I have to get myself better, because money is just a number. It's just something that goes up and down the bank account, and it doesn't matter how much you have. It's who you are. Like, were there any lessons from that earlier?
Yeah, one of the lessons was, I mean, so this was like 2005, 2006, like things were booming in the real estate market, and we made a lot of money in those years. And one thing that I wish I had been better about was like be a better steward of the expenses. Like really didn't need to spend $40,000 on brochures that like we didn't even use. Like we basically threw most of them away. Like we didn't need to do that. But at the time, I was like, oh man, we got to make like the nicest, beautiful brochure. They were beautiful.
Yeah.
Did they make us any money? Like, did anybody hire us to sell their house because these beautiful brochures? No. And there was a lot of wasted money on pursuing things like that. That sometimes you just don't know. A mistake that I made is I didn't get a mentor. I was just trying to I was just muscling through, making mistakes and thinking like, okay, I'm decently smart. I can figure this out. But man, like looking back, I should have read more books about the real estate business. I should have gotten a mentor to kind of teach me like, hey, you really don't need to spend $40,000 on brochures, as an example. So that's what comes to mind.
Which actually brings up a good question from. It's funny because when I first met you, I asked Amit like, kind of like, what should I know about you, just to get. And he's like, Ben's the most humble person you'll ever meet. He's a great human being. So,
That's nice of you to say that.
I've definitely witnessed that, and I've seen that, and he actually had a good question, kind of piggybacking off of that, was that if you or your best friend, or what was some of like the biggest failures that you made as an agent, as a leader, that significantly made you better as an agent or as a leader?
I think it's just the culmination of experience and being able to acknowledge the mistakes. I think a lot of us don't want to go there. It's painful. In my case, like man, we wasted so much money. I thought I was good. I was a finance major. International finance and marketing was my major. Like I'm good on Excel spreadsheets. All this kind of stuff. I don't go spend tons of money on things, and yet it's painful to know, man, we wasted a lot of money on, again, brochures, things like that. That I need this copy this like a super expensive copy machine that I spent all this money on a 4-year lease. Like, did I really need that thing? No, I could. So just like some of these things are like painful to recognize and to go back and say, okay, what patterns, what decisions was I making? So there's lots of those things. I think those include personal decisions, like as far as drinking alcohol, watching TV, not working out, things that are detracting energy from you. And then on the business, but those bleed into the business because as a realtor, the lifestyle is one and the same. Like if you decide to drink beers and watch TV the night before, you're not going to wake up early and get your mindset right and work out, get the energy high, the intentionality high, and you're going to wake up behind the eight ball the next morning on the Tuesday because you watched the whole Monday Night Football game until midnight, and then now you're not achieving what you want to achieve. So they bleed into one another. But I think the biggest thing is not a specific. It's just to be able to acknowledge where you've made mistakes, to slow things down enough to look back and say, okay, I made a mistake here. I'm going to learn from this. Again, where's the opportunity to grow from this? I'm not going to beat myself up about it. I'm not going to stay in that place of like shame or victimhood or anything like that. But okay, how do I reframe this into a way, again, as I said earlier, to learn from? And I think as a leader, we have to be open and honest with ourselves. Actually, so you're doing a podcast. I think it's amazing. I love podcasts. I listen to a ton of podcasts. So, I run the sports and entertainment division at Compass. And so I was like, man, we got to do something big. We're going to do a podcast. We're going to interview all these athletes. All these great ideas. But the division members didn't really follow suit. There was a lot of energy around it. And maybe I was driving that because I was so enthusiastic about it. But when push came to shove, we didn't have a lot of members that wanted to step up and do it. And then also the way that I was thinking about the podcast was incorrect. And it was humbling. It was maybe embarrassing. I wasn't embarrassed because I'm like down the road enough to know, man, like pivot quickly. It's okay. The best leaders are the ones that are able to show their vulnerability. And in this case, like, okay, hey, division, I had this great idea. I thought at the time, I kind of pushed it in front of everybody. Everybody seemed to be enthusiastic about it. When it came time to sign up and do these things, to make the podcast happen, the support wasn't there. And I can't do it. I'm not going to do it on my own because that's a full-time job.
Yeah.
The way I was thinking about it, and I don't have the time for that. And so humbly, we're not going to do this thing. And I felt a little bit of embarrassment and all that kind of stuff around it. But I was like, no, let's move on to the next thing. Okay, what can we do? And just pivot. And now we're even in an even better place as a division. So we didn't need the podcast to do this thing, but I could have just forced it and could have like tried to go against the grain and do that. So I think that's an example recently from last year where I made a mistake. I misread the situation. I overestimated whatever the case is. But man, let's recognize and move on. Like we don't need to linger there.
Yeah, and I think awareness is huge. Kind of going back, and we'll go into some of the other things that you mentioned because you mentioned a lot of good stuff. But awareness of just like who you are. I don't know if you follow like Rob Dyrdek. He's huge.
Oh, I heard him on a podcast. Yeah.
He's huge on energy, where he's gotten basically a year or 3 years in filming down to like 30 days or like 90 days. And he talked about how this year, starting in January, he had his first perfect 90-day cycle where he was waking up at like 3 or 4 a.m. every day. He was spending time with his family. He only worked 30% of the week. Like everything went perfect. And he's been tracking his life every single hour for the past 3 to 5 years. And he had his like first perfect 90 days. And I've noticed myself when I get good sleep, when I eat well, like I have great energy. And when I have something like I drink or I don't eat well, it's like my energy the next day is definitely off and it's not at 100%.
Yeah.
So is that something like you're super aware of now, is like your day-to-day energy, how you feel, and how you are throughout the day?
Yeah, I've heard Rob, now that you mention him, and it's like super impressive. Obviously, it's worked for him and he's very successful and it's impressive. It seems out of reach for me because I'm not going to track stuff. Like I don't care about my heart rate when I'm running stairs. I know what kind of workout I'm getting, like I don't need to track my sleep. I know if I'm sleeping well. So I've kind of gone against the grain in some of those ways where like it would be interesting to know my heart rate variability and all these things. But like, I think take my shirt off and I know what kind of fitness I'm in. Like
Yep.
I look at myself in the mirror, like there's no lying, and you don't have to be in Tour de France shape all year long, excuse me. So for me, it's more, I'm very much in line with the energy. Like I'm very much aware of what is depleting my energy and what is giving me energy. And sometimes I choose to do something that might deplete my energy. Like I was at a happy hour last night, but with intentionality,
Yep.
and I had 3 tequilas on the rocks. I enjoyed it. I don't beat myself up about it. It was great. It was with intentionality. Am I going to drink tonight? No. I know that I have like 5 drink limit for the week. That's kind of my thing. So I chose to drink 3 in one night, and then I got another 2 to go. I may not drink it. Sometimes if I'm over too. Maybe I'll go somewhere on Sunday afternoon to the sailing club and have a couple beers and whatever. Like I'm not like crazy about it, but I know how to get back to my baseline and to continue to grow from it. So I think, for me, it's all intentionality, like what, and awareness, to use your word as well. Like you got to know what gives me energy. So for instance, if I'm traveling or whatever, I'm in New York, I'm in a city, like what I will do when I get home is like the very next day, I will go out and like walk barefoot in my yard and for like half an hour and just get some sunlight and just walk around the yard barefoot and do some animal movements and like, just do some stuff in the grass, bare feet, get the feet all, muddy, or I don't care if it's raining or dry, but like I know that I feel really good after half an hour of like grounding. Some people might say grounding is bullshit. All right, fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. I know how I feel when I do it, and so I'm going to do those things, right? Like sauna, love it. Getting enough sleep, we all know that's good for you, right? So some things are more verifiable, but other things might seem a little woo-woo to certain people. But if it works for you, that's really the only thing that matters, right? At the end of the day.
Yep.
So, but unlike Rob, I don't track those things.
Yeah. Makes sense. And he even called it like the most unrelatable podcast ever. So,
Yeah, he's a special breed, like Tim Ferriss, like those kind of guys. Like, God bless them, but it's not, that would not work for me. That would stress me out. And like when I'm running, I don't want to be listening to music or tracking things and looking at my smartwatch. What I want to be doing is like be so in the moment that I'm just focused on my form, first of all, because running form, like some people just go out and run. Like I'm very focused on my form, and I got to be constantly, it's like meditative, right?
yep.
To do it that way. And I want to be focused on like absorbing everything that I'm around, like the trees, the environment. I don't want to be distracted by like, oh, what's my heart rate at right now? Or how many laps have I done? Or, what's my pace? It's interesting. Like I have a watch, I know the time, the overall time, and I might check in a little bit and see I'm trying to, do this within half an hour, but I'm not going to be like maniacal about it either, So, I think for me, it's like about being present. And sometimes if you're doing too much tracking, it takes you away from the thing that you're actually trying to achieve, which is presence in my case.
So, in a world where your phone could probably be going off every second, like with all of the clients, your team, Compass, like you could be having hundreds of emails come in. How do you keep that presence and push out all the distractions? What have you found that works for you?
Well, I've definitely gotten better. I mean, it's been a struggle, and I've tried to time block to just check emails during this time. But the problem is, every day is different. I'm showing here today. I'm showing there today. I'm not showing today. I've got a meeting here. I've got so I can't time block effectively in that way. So what I've done is just, but I'm not checking. I'm not living by the inbox anymore. I don't have alerts set up to pop up and notify me when a new email comes in on my phone or my computer. And when I'm like, okay, now it's like I'm going to be intentional. Right now I'm going to check email. I'm going to blow through these emails in the next 10 minutes, and I'm going to assign tasks to people, and I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do something else until I finish this. So then, of course, what ends up happening is you start checking emails for things that have to happen, maybe like do contracts and things like that. Let me finish checking the emails first, and then I'm going to get to like the 4 contracts that have to get sent out, or whatever, as an example. So I think the like not multitasking and just focusing on right now, I'm going to do emails. After that, then I'm going to take care of the 4 things that came up in the email that I got to address. And another tool I think for that is like, don't look at the email. I forget who said it, but it really is helpful. Is like, don't look at the email twice. If you're going to check the emails, clean that inbox out. Like assign or delete or respond. Like, but don't let it linger until later. Like put it in a folder if you're going to, like for taxes or whatever, right? Tax season right now, K1s are coming in. Print out the tax forms from E-Trade and from Fidelity. Like those are going to go into this folder. I'm going to sign those things. I'm not going to do it right now, but maybe Saturday morning I'll go in there and just like knock out all the tax forms that I got to print out, as an example. So trying to be as efficient as possible with stuff like that. And then with the phone is like, am I using the phone as a tool or as a distraction? Because yeah, I mean, the phone is like a crazy, amazing tool. What a blessing to be able to have all this stuff on the phone. But man, it can also be a killer of time and energy.
Yep.
Speaking of energy, right? If you're not aware of how you're using the phone,
Yeah.
and also like killer of relationships, right? If I'm on my phone all the time, even if I'm doing work, I'm being efficient, but I'm using it in front of my kids, and I just got my face buried in the phone. Like, what are they going to think of their dad? Like, oh, my dad was around, but he was always on his phone,
Yep.
like. And I've done that a couple times, like, but I try not to use the phone in front of them. Sometimes you have to, but I really try to be aware and conscious about how I'm using technology, and trying to be efficient.
Interesting. And I want to go into the assigning, delegating, and control part in a second. But what you just said at the last second, have y- has that ever been a point with your kids or anything where you started to catch yourself, or maybe even before the kids, where you were very involved with work, or you've burnt out and you just got to this space where you're uh, like I can't keep burning out, or I need to spend time out of work, or I need to give kids and the family more attention.
Oh yeah, for sure. I remember there was a time. I'm trying to think when it was. Man, it's like it all kind of blurs at some point once you've been doing this for long enough. But there was a point in time where I was just so burned out, and I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to work on the weekends. Like, I just don't care. Like, I'm not going to do it because I was working 6, 7 days a week, just grinding. As you know how it is. Anybody listening to this in this realtor world. And what's crazy is I let go. All of a sudden, so much business started coming in. Like, once I let go, like I totally believe in energy. Once I let go, like, great things happened. But I had to get to that point to let go, to stop forcing, and I was able to do all this business without having to work on the weekends as much. Maybe a little bit checking in here and there. And even more recently, like, it's been a very like transitional period in real estate after like 2 years of boom
Yep.
times. September, October rolled around and things got slow, pretty slow. Like, I was busy, but meaning like contracts weren't coming to fruition, and signings and things like that. So from like September to like mid February was like a pretty slow time. And it was a good test for me. Again, beginning of the year, as I mentioned earlier, like, the old me would be moving into this pattern of like high stress, got to get after it, to start the year. And I can honestly say this, the current version of myself was one like, I recognize that pattern that I've had before. I'm not going to go there. I've learned from that. It's not who I want to be. It's not in line with my values, all these things. And it didn't affect me. And it's almost like the universe was testing me, and then energetically. And then once I had proven that I'm not going to go there, you can push me, I'm not going to go there. And I had a couple like really high profile things I was working on that like didn't happen. And, not to get into details, but like I was tested,
Jeez.
for sure. And once the universe kind of acknowledged that, all right, Ben, like, you proved it to me, boom, all of a sudden things started happening and clicking once again, and it was like, I didn't have anything to release in this case, but I had to prove that I wasn't going to go down an old path. The devil was calling me, and I was like, no, I'm good, man, I'm good, but thank you. And so, yeah, like, I just that's like a current example, and now like super busy, and then it all turned one week where I had like 4 deals that I got signed in one week. And I was like, man, like, I haven't had 4 deals signed in one week in a while. I forgot what that felt like.
Felt nice.
So, oh, good, yeah. But I also, like, I'm not riding the highs and lows. Like, I acknowledge this feels good, just as I acknowledge the other part didn't feel good, but it's all good. Like, it's all fine
Yeah.
at the end of the day, And that's hard a place to get to.
As someone you said who's very like type A, as a lot of entrepreneurs or business owners, very type A, and you've said you've had issues in your past of letting go. You've had the control issues. How did you kind of reach that place where you're comfortable saying, okay, let me delegate this, let me build out enough support and structure and systems so that I don't have to be everything for everyone?
Yeah, it's hard. I don't know if for a lot of us it's ego. For a lot of us it's thinking I'm wasting time by having somebody else do it. I could just do it better. But then, yeah, you just get to a place where you realize if you really, well, hopefully you get to a place. Many people don't, and it took me a little while for sure of suffering and realizing, man, this is not in my best interest. I'm actually not being efficient. Like, I actually need to slow down a little bit, hire some leverage. Like, I was slow to hire my first assistant. I should have hired my first assistant a long time ago, but I guess I'm cheap, right? Like, I didn't want to spend the money. So I said, let me just build a team and get some agents around me. But I was still doing, if as a realtor we do 90 things in a week, right?
Yep.
Or I was like, I'm still doing the 90 things. Like, maybe I have more clients than I can personally handle. And so my teammates here are handling some of those things. But on the deals that I'm handling, I'm still doing 90 things. So the thing is, you have to get your first assistant to then, no matter what, go from 90 things to 15 things, and then spend the time to train around the other 85 or 75 things that you don't want to be doing anymore. And I think it ties down to something that, our mutual friend Shirag Shah
Yep.
talks about, which is like, calculate your hourly rate. So if you're locked into your hourly rate, okay, I shouldn't be doing these things, and maybe I'll still be doing them, but now I'm aware I shouldn't be doing them. And so let me find support and leverage to go and make that investment in myself. What could I do with more time, which will then give me more energy because I'm doing the things that I really want to do? Do I bet on myself that I can actually go bring in more business, that I can have an extra couple lunch meetings that week, that I can connect two people that I've been meaning to introduce to one another, as an example, right? Like, it's all about building the sphere, connecting with the sphere, amplifying that. And so I was like, yeah, you know what? I need to bet on myself. Like, I know that if I can free up an extra 10, 15, 20 hours a week and put that into high priority tasks, the 10 or 15 things that I really should be doing, by eliminating all the other stuff, man, like, this is great. So, and then you realize, okay, well, I got to build out an operations manual. I have to build out processes and systems, because if I'm going to remove myself from some of these things, I have to be able to do that. And I didn't do that for the longest time because I kind of felt like, oh, I need to do it myself. And then I realized, no, I'm just going to hire somebody and they're going to do it. And I have to give them the input. And so sometimes I think we're so busy running around, like, we don't want to slow things down to do the training.
Yep.
But I don't know if it's Rory Vaden or somebody that had said, it's like the rule of 35 or something like that. So if to train somebody, like, let's say you tie your kid's shoelaces, right? It takes a minute. You should spend 35 minutes training your child how to tie their shoelaces, because the return on that is it happens every day.
Yeah.
So over time, if you do these things for people, so that was the rule, and it sounds like a lot. I'm going to spend 35 times the amount of time to do this thing to train somebody, but yeah, it does make sense, And so, my kids tie the shoelace, and now I just have to come up and, like, tie it a little tighter, Slater. Like, you're going to play soccer, you can't let this thing untie in the first 10 minutes of the game. So, but I've saved a lot of time by not having to tie shoelaces, as an example, right? And so within work, same thing. You got to slow down. You got to take a step or two backwards to then catapult yourself forward.
And you said a lot of things. I think it was Rory Vaden with his book, like, I think it was maybe Multiply Your Time. And betting on yourself, like, I was at an event and Ryan Serhant was talking about, he looked at the cost of hiring a driver and it was like 60 or 80,000. He's like, could I close 5 deals or an extra 6 deals if I don't have to drive everywhere? Yeah. So let me bet on myself, hire a driver, and he did it. This was like early in his career. But I do want to touch on the slowing down to kind of speed up thing, because I feel like there's a lot of leaders, and definitely type A, like, people, when you're a high performer, you're performing at this high level and you're doing all these deals, you're the rainmaker, to take the time, whether it's a day or a few hours or whatever, to train or to build out the manuals, that could seem like a waste of your time. You're like, well, I got this deal going, I got this client. What kind of helped you, and what did you do to start to build out that structure and support and the training for your team? Was it a...
Well, it's funny. Like, I was slow to adopt it. Like I said, I wish I had figured this out earlier, but I had to go through that process, and that was my individual journey. Hopefully, anybody who listens to this podcast that's like me 10 years ago gets there faster, right?
Yep.
By virtue of, like, you putting this out and doing the podcast and interviewing people like me that have kind of been through this and you can learn from. And I read books, and but I should have, like I said, I should have gotten that mentor. But one thing that I realized, and especially now I'm 44, is okay, like, the peak performance is like when you're in the gym, right? Like, when you're actually doing the weights, when you're lifting the heavy weights, when you're doing the squats and the deadlifts. But for me to be able to do that, I have to spend an hour. I mean, I don't have to, but I do. I choose to spend an hour stretching before I. So I'm in the gym at 5:30 when they open. I usually don't start my workout until 6:30. I'm warming up. I'm doing like if I'm gonna do upper body, I'm gonna do like the bicycle thing like that. If I'm doing lower body, I'll do the elliptical or the bike, warm up the lower body. Then I'll stretch. I'll do all the core stuff. I'll do like make sure my soft tissue and everything is ready to go. But I know that if I just go in the gym and start doing squats, like a lot of us in college, right? We just show up. Like there's no warm up, there's no stretching. What are you talking about, man? Like in and out, an hour. Let's go down a whey protein smoothie. Well, that's great. That works in college, but it's not sustainable over the long run. And so, do you want to be sustainable over the long run? Like a lot of those guys that probably did that in college that didn't adapt, they look like crap now. They're overweight, they got injured. Like I don't want to get injured. I want to I have to focus on my soft tissue and my flexibility to avoid those kind of things because especially at this stage of life, like it's going to happen if you don't do it. It's going to happen anyway, no matter what. So try to minimize those things as much as possible. And it's no different in work. Like you got to put in the work. It's not all peak moments. And I think actually the best leaders, the most entrepreneurial people, first of all, like Jeff Bezos sleeps like what, 8-9 hours a night or something like
Yeah.
that. So what is his secret sauce? Like he's the idea guy. And then he probably gets on a phone call, an email, and like has everybody execute for him. So actually the biggest skill set, probably the richest people, the most successful people are the ones that actually slow down to the point where they're so slowed down that they can just like zoom into this matrix, see what everybody else doesn't see and show it to everybody and then have them build it out. Steve Jobs, probably the same thing. So I actually think, what I'd like to do is keep getting more like that, like keep slowing things down more where I'm not just like, it feels good when you're like, boom, 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 man, I just ran an energetic marathon today. I just knocked out like 100 freaking things today. Like feels good, but is that the most productive thing for high performers? Probably not. And I was just chasing my tail and I was making money and doing all those things, but I realized it wasn't sustainable. And it was depleting my energy at the end of the day.
So what does that kind of look like? Did you have a out of office meeting? Did you hire someone to kind of, you started walking through the processes of how you did things? Was it like you and a coach working together and building that process? When you look at how you built it, what did that kind of look like?
As far as the operations manual?
The operations manual, or just taking time to work on the business versus in the business. What did that look like for you? Was it with someone you hired, a mentor, or was it a day? Was it, I blocked out this time, this 2 hours to build out this? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it was it was hiring a director of operations and then putting it on her to, okay, here's the task, this is the goal, this is the objective. Yeah, and then spending the time with her to like say, this is how I do this. This is how I would show a property, and kind of going down the list so that she could then incorporate it into that. And then she would come back and show me, and I say, no, okay, we need to tweak this over here, that thing over there. I mean, obviously now with like AI and ChatGPT, you could probably build out an operations manual a lot easier than we did. But then it was linking it to, at Compass, we can link the operations manual into templates that live in Marketing Center or live in Business Tracker, and action items and task lists and all this stuff. So then it was integrating it into the technology platform that we have at Compass to be able to do that. But yeah, it's like weekly calls, making sure that we like spend the time to go do that. I used to think it's like, man, I don't have an hour to like sit on a phone call and go through like how to build an operations manual. But like actually that hour is really useful, because if I do want to have a team, I kind of need it because I'm blessed to have enough business that I can't handle it all myself. So if I'm going to have a team, how do I ensure that the client is getting the best service, no matter if it's me or Jason or Dayani or Robbie or Eric or anybody else on the team that's handling that client? And so that helps me have less stress and more confidence that yeah, hey, we're going to do a great job for you. It doesn't matter who it is, because we all have this standard for excellence and we all have a measurable way of doing something.
Yeah, it kind of goes to the book, It's Who, Not How. And what, for at least for you and the person you hired, what was most important with that operations person? Like, what were you specifically looking for, or what were the most important things you were looking for?
Well, this individual, I mean, she's amazing, and they don't make them like her. So I got super lucky. But I think energetically, honestly, Andrew, is when you put out the right energy, like you attract. Like again, it sounds weird for some people, but like I've never had a problem with people coming into my life when I need them, and I don't know. So I think it's like we got to work on our own energy because like we're not going to attract the people and bring in the right people if we don't clean our energy up and if we don't literally attract, that which is what we want. So the first part is like I don't know how this person exists because she's so fantastic in every way, but she also ran law firms, and so she didn't come in from real estate, but she ran law firms, and she loves to help other people shine. So she's not competing with me in the sense that like she knows what I'm good at and she loves to make other people shine. She did it her whole career in law. And so easily translatable skill set into real estate. This is not rocket science. There's a lot of things that have to get done. She's very organized and she has a passion for that. So I said, okay, this is the person that I want, that I need, like my wingman, and she's going to help me get this done. And so I think that's probably the most important thing. Like, is the energy right? The skill set obviously has to line up too, but I think those are the two things. Is the skill set there, but is the energy right? Sometimes we hire just for skill set, or we hire just, I really like this person, but they don't have the skill set. But you got to get both.
I want to talk about the stress, everything that you learned from mindfulness, the what you've learned going through that with all of the agents, yourself. But first, before we get into that, I want to bring it to just like the agent level, and ask, because people look at you, and if like your best friend or family member was a brand new agent and they come to you and they say, hey, I want to work with the same type of clients you work with, celebrities and athletes, and you were no longer in the business and you could introduce them to your contacts, what would be the outline of things that they should do specifically to get into that market, things that worked for you? And then the second part is, what are some expectations that they should have?
Well, I mean, I think it's, yeah, you always want to try to create a niche, separate yourself a little bit. But I think it's all about developing authentic relationships. And I think it's not forcing it. Like I didn't seek to go after celebrities or athletes. It just happened. I had an opportunity and I was like, oh, look at this. Here's something that I think I can address. And I went after it. So I think sometimes like, forcing it to happen is the wrong approach. We should all chase the opportunity in front of us. And we sometimes have to slow it down enough to realize, oh, there is this opportunity here. It's right in front of me. I'm not even looking at it. I'm not even like recognizing it. I mean, I think for the people that say, okay, this is something I really want to pursue and I'm going to get there no matter what, and I'm just going to like claw my way to the top, that can happen. You can do that as well, certainly. But I think it takes intention. Okay, well, how am I going to do that? How am I going to build relationships? How am I going to offer something of value, right? That's how you build relationships, not asking something or not being salesy. How am I going to be consistent? Like there's a business manager that I was, probably emailing and, not every month or every week, but for years, consistently. And, finally he responded and he's like, you know what, Ben, like I really appreciate your consistency. Like this was, probably 7-8 years, like before this guy gave me the time of day. And, so then I drove 3 hours to go meet him because that's where he's located. And he took me to lunch at his club and like we had a great meeting and, that kind of stuff. And so, it's like how many people would really chase somebody for 7 or 8 years? Like,
Yeah.
do you give up or do you not give up? And he recognized that. He's, like, I think that set me apart. And once I got in front of him, he realized like, hey, I do a good job for my clients. I care. Like I'm not out publicizing and trying to get my selfie and, do all this stuff. Like, yeah, I have some client testimonials on my website, but like I could have a lot more. But I know not to ask for most of my clients for that. And I should probably do a better job of that because I have many that would probably give me a testimonial. But, I think it's just being authentic, like chasing a relationship, being strategic. Like how can I put myself in the middle of that group of people? What events are happening? What do I have to do to show them that I'm here for the long run? I'm not just here to try to hit it, one
Yeah.
time. And I think people get impatient. Like, it seems like I have all this success and all these things, but like, yeah, nobody knows that I was chasing this guy for 7 years, I mean, now they do because I'm talking about it with you. But they don't know people don't know what happens behind the scenes. We just look at other people on Instagram and or whatever, and most people are like in our business and real estate are like super self promoters. They're not doing half of what they say they're doing, and like people see through that. So if that's going to be your approach, I don't think it's going to. It might work here and there, but it's not going to get you to the top of the food chain in that world. I mean, certainly not in sports entertainment. Like people don't want the realtor who thinks they are a celebrity themselves. Typically, I've seen some of those celebrity realtors and like they don't provide great service. Typically, like they're more focused on themselves than anything else. And like, no, we're in the service business. Like we got to service the client. We're not, yes, we can make great money and win these awards or whatever, but it's not about us. It's about delivering the best level of service. And by the way, I have a very famous female rapper that we're helping right now and a very famous actor that we're helping right now. They're both rentals. People think sports entertainment, oh, so sexy. Yeah, I mean, in some ways, yeah, but they're rentals, and one's a 3-month rental. Like money from that, but do I still deliver the same level of service? Yeah, and actually, we have the actor, then we have his assistant, then we've got the business manager, then we've got the other assistant. Like there's like all these layers of stuff that's happening for a 3-month rental. So is that really what you want, or you just looking at the shiny object out there and saying, oh, I want to work with athletes and celebrities, but they don't really know what it's like to do that. So nothing's as sexy as it seems, at the end.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think I heard somewhere that you're a Grateful Dead fan.
Oh yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah.
It's like they have that going above and beyond kind of mentality where they're like they always did more than everyone else. And hearing you talk and what you talk about, it seems like you've taken some of that and you've instilled that into your business. And just hearing, because everyone talks about value, like,
Yeah.
but for example, if you're just sending like this business manager, hey, for just a simple example, if like it was a client and you're just sending them, hey, here's these homes for 7 years, they'd probably turn you off at some point. So there's probably, and you weren't asking for his business for 7 years too, because he would have turned you off.
Right.
It would be like unsubscribe or block. What specifically do you, because I know there's probably a thought process. You're like, okay, there's this person, let me send him this, or this would be something to send him. How do you kind of think through that? And like, what specifically do you send people to add value? I know everyone's going to be a little bit different, but just using one as an example.
Well, that one was hard because I didn't know him. Like I never met him in person. There was an introduction that was made, I think probably in the very beginning, but like that was it. Now I had his email. So, and I had an introduction, but these business managers are super busy. So I don't recall all the emails, Andrew, but I think I could tell you the spirit of it was the only value I could probably is like, I would love to take you to lunch. I will drive up to Orlando anytime. You let me know when. I would love to just get to know you. I'd love to, get in front of you. I'd love to, what can I do for this guy? Like, nothing, right? So he doesn't need anything or want anything from me. So I wasn't just inviting him for lunch basically, or dinner or whatever. And then he ended up inviting me for lunch, which is a nice thing. So, but I think I think he knew that like I was real. Like, I think for that one, it was just, okay, here's a guy that is just consistent. Like, and if I'm going to refer somebody to my client, I want somebody who I can trust. And I feel like I could trust him even though I don't know him, because he's so consistent. Like he's got to be a good realtor if he's willing to take me down for this long, and maybe I sent him a couple of articles here and there or like, some of those kinds of things, but I was very aware, like, this guy doesn't want to hear from me every month. Like, so it might've been like 4 reach outs a year, something like that, but just a slow drip, In other cases, it's like, okay, I see, like as an example, I had lunch yesterday with one of the top financial advisors in town, right? And so I didn't know this, but because I don't know him that well, but we got to talk about a lot of things. He plays basketball every day. Like he's a huge basketball nut, like doing all these leagues and like at people's houses and stuff. And I was like, oh man, like, I got a good buddy I just sold a house to a couple years ago who's a huge basketball nut too. And he's a hedge fund guy and like, whoa, hedge fund financial advisor, like these guys could maybe do some stuff together, right? So like one of the things I'm going to do between today and tomorrow is introduce them and say, you guys love basketball. I no longer play basketball because I don't want to get injured, but but you guys are after it. That's awesome. because it's all about like who you're playing with, getting the games, like the community and all that kind of stuff. And so like I'm going to connect them and see if they can hook up for some games, and get on each other's, radar and do that stuff. And okay, here I am connecting with two clients, or one's not a client. I'd love to get referrals from him, but how do I build that trust with him? Like, how do I add value? It may not be on the business side. It's just on the personal side. It's like the fact that I care enough about his basketball to like introduce him to somebody else that I think he could benefit from in a business setting is great. But it's really about, we all want connections, like the Harvard happiness study. I'm sure you're aware of it. Like the most successful, happy people in life, successful meaning like happiness in life, not monetarily, are the people that establish close relationships their whole lives, and are always doing it at every age, and have friends that are not, if you're 70 years old, all your friends should not be 70 years old. You should have friends that are 30 years old. Like when you're 30 years old, you should have friends that are 70 years old. Like it's all, we're social animals, we're social creatures. And as men, I mean, I think it's gotten a lot better, but like, my dad's generation, like they're not friends. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we got business associates, but my dad didn't call buddies up. Like he didn't have buddies. Like, it wasn't like that. So I think, for us, it's like, will I get referrals from the financial advisor because I connect him with somebody that he plays basketball with? I don't know, but I'm just trying to do what I can to be authentic, to show that I care about him. Again, to be consistent. Like my brand is to him is what he thinks I will be when I walk in the door every time. Like, what does he think I'm going to be? If I'm up here, I'm down there, I'm all over the place. Like, not a good brand. Probably not going to refer me to somebody, but he knows I'm good at what I do. He knows that I care about him. He knows that I'm interested in making connections. I don't know, like it's not like rocket science, but I think too many of us chase stuff and force it, and you know, don't play the long game.
Yeah. So is being that connector and making introductions, has that been a big part of your career?
Yeah, and you got to know how to make introductions. Some people don't want to be introduced to other people, right? So like you're giving them a homework assignment, like for the business manager, I'm not introducing him to people. Like he doesn't want my introductions, like that's not what he wants. Some of the people that refer me a lot of stuff, they just want me to do the deals. Like I have financial advisors that work with athletes, and some of them are okay with introductions and value that. Others like, Ben, I just want you to handle my clients. That's all I want you to do. So I'm not going to try to force introductions there. Or if I do, I'll ask them and I'll say, hey, would you like this? Other people, I will just make the connections because I know based on the personality types and who they are, my relationship with them, like I could just make these introductions without asking if it's okay first. So I think it's just understanding, like having that emotional intelligence to like understand the nuances there. And, but I generally think of myself as a connector. I'm always trying to connect people. That's what I love about this business. And so, but it's knowing how to do it the right way. Like I don't want homework assignments from people, and I don't want to give people homework assignments.
That's good. It's thinking of it as like, well, yeah, you could just make a three-way connection all the time, but like, hey, meet him, hey, meet her, you should meet them. And it's just, well, not everybody wants that. So if you never ask them, then they may actually be put off by it at the end of the day.
Yeah. Other people, like this morning, I listened to a great podcast with Tim Ferriss, with Kelly Starrett, the guy that wrote Becoming a Supple Leopard. And I'm all into like primal movements and body mechanics and stuff like that. So I sent it to a few people that I thought would like it. Um, you send a podcast to somebody, like you're thinking about them, first of all. So that's cool. You send them something of value. That's cool. It took me 2 seconds, right, to send out a few, probably four people of the podcast, but like they know I was thinking about them. I connected something that I think they will like with something that I liked. And so I think they'll like the podcast. They'll be glad to have received that text from me today. So nothing business about it, but what I've just found over the years, Andrew, is, just again, being curious, having interests. You can relate to more people when you're more curious, when you have different interests and things like that. Like I love many different things. And so I can try to connect with more people on those things. And when I come across something that I don't know anything about, I try to remain curious about it. And maybe it's something that I'll learn to add to my repertoire, maybe not, maybe I won't like it. Like I don't golf. I don't go boating. Like people said, oh man, like, Ben, like I'm telling you, like you got to play golf. I get it. Like I understand all that stuff. it's not my thing. I'm not going to go force learning how to play golf.
It's
I'm not going to go buy a boat just so I can take clients out in it. I don't love to be on a boat. So why would I
yeah,
do that?
or buy like tables at a club, which I heard
Yeah,
was a tough lesson earlier.
I've done that. Yeah, I did that. Didn't work so much, for the business side. But for me, I didn't want to be out late like that till 4 in the morning, and it's just like, why am I doing this? So yeah, that was like early days of like sports entertainment. Oh, I'm gonna buy tables and invite some athletes to come, and yeah, it was kind of fun, but like, you know what they're doing. Like,
Yeah.
they're not even talking to me. Like it's
They're just there to
so
party and that's it.
yeah. Yeah. So, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. What I said, what I want to do is I want to educate athletes. That's cool. I like that. So let me teach around some of these things.
And so before we touch on that in a second, you mentioned something that was, I feel like, a common thread between probably the most successful people that I know or have been lucky enough to be connected to or meet or whatever, is they're just all very curious. And it's like this curiosity trait that if you can, I feel like you can train it. It's something that you could train if you want. But if I don't know if you've seen that or if you just do you think that's common for a lot of people at certain
No,
levels?
I
Like,
don't think it's common. Totally not. And the reason is because we are like programmed. Like we are just on autopilot. We are numbed. We're numbing ourselves with like pain medication, with alcohol, with drugs. Like, listen, I drink, and no problem. Like everybody's free to make their choices. But if you're gonna make your choice to like be a zombie most of the day because you're like on your phone, you're scrolling through Instagram, you're watching TV, like, all right, have a great life, man. That's not my choice. So if I'm curious about something, like I'll pick up my phone to learn about it. And like I heard something on the podcast today, like now I can't remember the name of it, but it's a type of like balance board, And I was like, man, what is that? Like I never heard of that before. So I'm gonna get one of those things. Like I'm curious. I'm like, oh, mobility. Like this is cool. So I picked up my phone to look at it, and then I put my phone down. I didn't start scrolling through stuff to see what everybody else is doing on Instagram. But I think, technology. Again, we talked about it earlier, like an amazing blessing that I can go to Vermont for several months of the year and work and have my laptop and my phone and make money doing it that way, right? But if I'm not purposeful about it, like, yeah, I like to watch TV just like the next guy. I could sit there and scroll through Twitter just like the next person. And sometimes I do but I'm like, okay, I'm going to scroll through Twitter for the next 20 minutes and learn about some stuff and see what people are posting. And like, okay, but now it's getting too much. Like I'm beyond that limit. Like I've been staring at a screen for 20 minutes. Like I need to zoom out. I need to like look at something like 50 feet away now and like balance, like balance myself out. Like I'm not going to sit here head down staring at the phone all day. Anyway, so I'm kind of rambling, but I think curiosity is a skill. The easy thing to do is just go with the flow. The hard thing to do is like stick your head up and say, oh no, like this is cool. Like life is so abundant. I know so little. Wow, like holy shit, I'm alive. Like there's so many things I have to learn about here, and just love is a skill. Empathy is a skill. Like I realized all these things are skills. And then you look at somebody like Jimmy Carter. I mean, the guy, you look at the things that he's done in his life, obviously US president, engineer, millionaire peanut farmer. He had the best peanuts in Georgia. I mean, the Carter Center, overseeing elections, Nobel Peace Prize, master carpenter, avid bird watcher. I mean, like, wrote 30 books by himself. Like, holy shit! Like, how does one person do all this stuff? Yeah, he's had 90 something years to do these things, but like, what an inspiration! Like looking at people like that have done so much that can be models for us to kind of pull us forward and just teach us and show us.
yeah, it's being willing to be a sponge and being willing to learn, following that like thread of curiosity. It's like interesting because I know Jimmy Carter, but I didn't know he did X, Y, and Z, like you said. So it's like taking that time to like read and dive deep into topics. And what's interesting about you is your willingness to teach and educate. And I was curious about why do you think stress? Because I had Ahmed on as one of the earlier podcasts, and when he wrote about a post on Facebook about how he was feeling, he had a lot of friends that recently committed suicide, and he had thoughts about it. And this was years back. He had a lot of the top agents when he wrote about the suicide, the depression, mental health. He had a lot of top agents reach out to him after that post. And it makes me think just people who are high performers, people who are type A, or just they're very ambitious people. Why do you think stress is so prevalent in like burnout and anxiety, and why did it become important to you recently? I know it wasn't recent, by the way, so that was the wrong way
Yeah,
of
well,
wording it.
it's because we're not living in accordance with our values. So some people don't even know what their values are. They haven't, again, earlier conversation topic, they haven't slow down enough to like, okay, these are my values. Like, this is what's really important to me, and write them down. Come up with a personal mission statement. Like, this is kind of like 101. Like, if you don't know where you're going, you can go anywhere. Like, it's like, I forget what song it is. I think it Dawes. Like, if you don't know where you're going, so it's like, all right, well, first of all, figure out where you want to go. Like, what's your life vision? Like, what does that look like? What is it that you're, trying to get to? Meanwhile, being totally satisfied in the present moment, knowing that it's all about the journey. So, I think a lot of people haven't, for me, it's like, and for you as well, like the personal development work, being curious, man, like, how can I be happier? How can I reduce stress? Those kind of things. But I think for a lot of people, the first thing, like, okay, establish your values. And then once you know what those are, you may not get there right away, but what decisions are you making? What habits are you forming? And how are you living in accordance with the values? You say you want to be a great father, but you're on your phone all the time when you're with your kids, or you're yelling at them, or whatever the case is, and if you do make a mistake, are you actually apologizing? Are you showing them your humanity and your humility and saying, hey, you know what? I'm not better than you. Just because I'm your father doesn't mean that I can yell at you or whatever. And I'm sorry. I made a mistake, And so I think as we get closer to living in accordance with our values and then taking steps every day to do that, you start realizing, oh, now it's in flow. Now the energy is good. And, we're not going to be 100%. We're not going to be like all like Rob Verdick or whatever. But if I can get it right like 85% of the time, like that's good. That's good. Like that's a win. So I think the stressful things, creep in little by little until you explode. And over time, we're not aware of how stressed we are. And so then we just seek to numb the pain or numb the stress with things that are actually making us more stressed because they're not good for us energetically or physically or health wise or mentally or spiritually or emotionally, So then we make, it's like the upper limit problem with the self-sabotage creeps in. And now it's like a vicious circle down, a vicious spiral down, which you can see how that leads to successful people that look like you from the outside. You're like, oh man, I want to be like that person. And then they commit suicide or they're miserable. We all know these people. And it's like, well, how are you so miserable? Like I know celebrities, like some of the most famous people in the world that are some of the unhappiest people in the world. And like nobody knows. But I've talked to their, they don't know that I know, but I've talked to their business managers or people that are close to them that are like, yeah, it's like a big problem. And I'm like, man, I never would have known that. Like that's crazy. Like, how is this possible? This person's so famous, so rich, so talented, and so miserable.
Yeah, and we talked about this earlier. You've started doing stress reduction and mindfulness workshops inside of Compass, and you've gotten to get in front of several thousand agents. So between that and between everything that you've learned and what you've seen with like clients, what's helped you or helped them the most through this process?
Yeah, so I mean, I've sorry for the barking dog.
No, you're good. It's
Hear
fun.
that they're like working from home, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's like I said, it's been a long journey for me to kind of do this, and then I wasn't like sharing it with people because who wants to hear about my mindfulness journey or my meditation or whatever. But I think as I started becoming more successful or more this or that, people started asking me. And I think as I was living the life and people started saying, oh, like, how are you doing this? Like, you seem like you're happy or you seem like you're not stressed out or Like, no, I used to have a major stress problem, major anxiety problem. My nickname growing up was TNT, like major anger problem. Like, so it ain't what it seems, you know? And just going through this, and then I become more open to talking about it because I realize like people, like more people, especially now, post COVID, are really struggling with mental health issues and so much polarity in the world and all these things. And so, you know what? No, I'm going to lean into this, and this is something that I think is the most important thing in life in terms of being truly successful is like being truly happy, whatever that definition is for you. And happy maybe is not the right word, but being truly at peace in that way. So, like again, go into your values, like understanding what life you're trying to live with purpose, with intentionality, and that includes like intentionality for having fun. Also, like have fun. Like, why are you living your life if you're not having any fun? Like sometimes I've suffered from or realized like, hey, you know what, I'm not having enough fun. Like this is screwed up, man. Like I'm doing all these things for everybody else, now I'm able to catch myself really fast around it. So anyway, there's so many topics. It's such a rich uh, universe to like delve into when you start going on this path of personal development and mindfulness and goal setting and habit formation and money and health and relationships. Like it's never ending. And so I'm super curious about it and I'm super passionate about it and I'm willing to talk about it now. And so my wife and I decided, we talk about it all the time amongst ourselves. And so she's a mindfulness coach and we push each other. Like she's into crystals and journaling and I'm into breath holding and meditation. So she meditates as well and I like crystals, but it's like we have different things that we're super into and that become curious about. Like she's gone through family constellation and Ayurvedic yoga training. Like I'm not going to get certified in those things and I'm not going to go, but I'm curious to hear what she has to say about it. But I have other modalities that I'm really focused on that she's learning about. And so, and it's like kind of this male female, thing. She's married to a realtor. She's seen where I've evolved and gone through the stress points and the evolution. And so we just said, you know what, we're going to start doing some workshops for realtors at Compass. And let's see how it goes. And, because I have some relationships higher up in the company, I said, hey, can you help us spread the word? And so this quarter we've got in front of like 1,000 Compass agents and we're going to get on the Compass coaching platform now and start offering a 5-week intro to mindfulness and stress reduction course for these realtors, and then start building out from there and seeing where that goes and seeing where the demand is. But we've been able to test some of these things through these workshops and have gotten great feedback. I think we have a good dynamic of like, the flow and the banter and like,
Back and forth.
yeah, just being real about it. Like let's be honest. Like no one's got it figured out. We're on the path just like everybody else. Yeah, we have some things I think we can share and teach because we live that life. And I've also realized, Andrew, very few people uh, very few people can actually teach around these topics, like because they're not practicing, like they're not actually meditating. They might say they're meditating, or they may go on Instagram or whatever and sit there with a cushion and pretend they're meditating, but like they do it for a week, but like they're not actually doing it. They're not actually walking the walk. And I think with us, like we are walking the walk, and we're making mistakes, and we're figuring it out, and we're open about it, and it is what it is. But yeah, like we've accumulated a lot of knowledge. I've been evernoting. You and I talked about it. I've evernoted since 2017. The podcast, the books, the articles, like all my own thoughts that come in during moments of inspiration. And like I have a lot of content there, and she's got a lot of content there. And so let's start getting this out. And so I don't know. We'll talk in a year and see where it all is. But it's something that we're super passionate about that can help people, and it could be a business also. And so. But let's figure that out, and we'll see where it goes from there. So that's kind of one of the paths. That's kind of the new path that's opened up for us in 2023.
Nice. And so, like, if I were an agent that came to you, whether it was like on your team or within the division, and what were some of the things that you went through in the workshop that you heard really great feedback on that people really liked?
Well, they liked that we're giving them practical tools. So every workshop we've done one breath tool. So whether it's box breathing or the 4-7-8 or the 4-7-8 breath or the physiological sigh. So like we're giving them things that they can do in the moment, right? Like that they can actually implement like right before that phone call that they got to make to that client that they probably think may not go that well, or when they're on a client tour and they're in their car and the listing agent's not there and now they got to push everything else back. Okay, and giving them techniques like Sharon Salzberg's RAIN technique, recognize. So something happens, recognize it, acknowledge slash accept it, investigate it, and don't identify, non-identification. So like tools, like things that maybe I've read Sharon Salzberg stuff, I've read John Kabat-Zinn stuff. So like pulling all this stuff and kind of delivering it in a format that makes sense, doing a guided meditation, going through gratitude, sharing some of the science behind meditation and neuroplasticity, and then tying in like real life examples as a realtor. I'm going through exactly what they're going through, and so some of that feedback has been cool. And then just realizing like no one on the coaching at Compass platform is offering those things. There's ninja selling over here, and there's sales tactics over here. All that stuff is great, but my thesis is at the end of the day, you can incorporate techniques and strategies into becoming a quote unquote better realtor. But if you're not happy, like to the earlier conversation, like you're getting a lot of sales, you're doing all this stuff, but you're miserable. Like, what's the point? Like you can actually be happy and have a lot of sales. Let's just reframe and let's help you get there. And that's like the aha moment for us.
So, and I know I want to be cognizant, but there is something that you just said there. How do you go from unhappy to happy? Like, it feels, I know it's a very 30,000-foot question, but there's a lot of unhappy people in the world. So, what do you think?
Well, I think a lot of people are chasing peak experiences, first of all, and that defines happiness for them. Like, am I getting that new car? Am I getting that watch? But what they're doing is they're chasing consumerism, or they're chasing comparison. I know in real estate, it's a lot of comparison. Oh, look at this person's sales volume. Look at that person's sales volume. Cut it out. Like, don't compare yourself to anybody. That's the most ridiculous thing. Like, when you zoom out enough, like we're all part of the same energy field. We are all part of the same like living and breathing organism. At the end of the day, like day to day, like we're not operating in that space generally, but like we need to capture a little bit of that. And the more we work on ourselves and have mindfulness practices, we start realizing we're all one and the same. Like it's all just this flow. It's like this dance. Like you can't control it. So it's not just one thing. Unfortunately, it's understanding your trigger points, right? Like what are your triggers? But it all comes down to slowing down, being more still, being more present. Like I think that's the only way to get there. And it doesn't mean that you're less intense. It doesn't mean that you don't set goals. It doesn't mean that you can't be a type A. You might reframe as you start going down this path what those goals are. And I think I would argue that you become more efficient. You're going to make more money. You're going to connect better with people. You're going to have better health, like everything. So that's why it's just like, holy shit. Like I need to like help people get there, and try to be an example also. Because like, who am I to teach them if I'm not doing it myself, But I can say like, I'm making more money, I'm healthier. And granted, I say all this with humility because all this could be changed right now. Like something could fall on the roof and I could die. Like right now, I know every day is a good day to die. So I'm not saving anything for 10 years from now or a month from now. Like I'm trying to fill all my life buckets every day. Like I'm trying to have this flywheel of energy going around every day. So every day I know what again, and it goes back to values. Like if I'm connecting with people, right? If I'm moving my body, like that's super important for me. Doing something work-wise, adding some contribution to my career, that's important for me. Building relationships with my family and my friends, that's important for me. Meditating or having some kind of introspective mindfulness practice, that's important to me. So like, we figure out what those things are and like do them every day. And maybe this thing over here takes up 5 hours of the day, the work or whatever. Maybe the movement of the body only takes up half an hour today, but maybe tomorrow it takes up 2.5 hours. But like, you kind of figure it out. Sometimes the work is 12 hours. Like I just went all in today and I had to do these things, but at least I still thought about the other things and I'm going to get back on track on those things tomorrow. But like not letting yourself veer too far away. So unfortunately it's not a simple answer, but if I had to sum it up in one word, it would be start getting on the mindfulness journey, because that is the base upon which everything is built. Like that is the foundation of the house. And as you build that solid foundation, man, you can build a freaking mansion on top of that thing, and it's humming, and you can put solar panels, and you can have the urinal in your bathroom if you want to, the steam shower, the sauna, like the workout room, the gym, like, the figurative house that you're building for yourself. Like you can have it all. But no house is going to last forever either. So like, enjoy it, man, because nothing's guaranteed in life, as we know. So it's always like, I think about death a fair amount, right? Not in a morbid way, but for what I just mentioned, this is all going to end. I don't know when. I don't want it to end right now, but if it ends right now, I'm ready for it. I'm not scared of it. I'm not going to try to do something to bring it on either. But you just like having. It's always like having this. Again, it's mindfulness because you're not thinking that way once when you're not having some sort of stillness practices in your life. But once you start bringing those stillness practices in and doing them every day, you start incorporating them in small moments. And life is just a series of small moments.
Nice. I like that. And to cap it off, I want to ask, what is your favorite mindfulness or stillness practice, and how can someone practice, like start doing that into their life, bring it into their life?
For me, like the keystone habit for me is meditation, and there's many different kinds of meditation out there. I do two that I pretty much alternate between, which is one is a mantra based, kind of like transcendental meditation,
Okay.
and then the other one is like a more Zen based mindful awareness meditation, where I just sit down, I observe my mind, I watch it go, I bring it back, watch it go, bring it back, watch it go, bring it back, watch it go, bring it back 1,000 times, whatever, how many times it goes away. Don't judge it, just do it. There's a lot of mindfulness techniques out there for sure, but that's my main one. And like right now, I got a qigong coach in Portugal, and I'm speaking of energy. I'm learning about qigong and doing that practice. Not every day right now, but I'm building the practice, and it's been pretty cool. It's been pretty cool, like to do that. I tried Tai Chi many years ago. I was like, it's not really my thing, but qigong I'm feeling much more connected to. And it's like your eyes are closed, and it's kind of like the monks that can kick everybody's ass, with their eyes closed. Like you start like visualizing your hands and the energy, and like it's been pretty cool. So I'm super into primal movements. Like it's for me, like crawling across the floor and many different bug crawls or animal movements. Like that's stillness practice right there. Like you're just you and the floor and the room, and so it could be, there's so many different ways to do it. And I think I would just challenge anybody to just start doing it. Just start going down the path and being curious, and then everybody's journey will unfold as it should.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to tie together. Just be curious of practicing mindfulness, practicing stillness. And there's a lot of things I could talk to you about, but I want to thank you and appreciate you, your inspiration as a leader, as a father, as a husband, as someone just anyone could learn a lot from. So I want to thank you for coming on and just sharing the lessons of your life and your story and kind of what you've learned throughout the journey.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Andrew. It's great. I always love our conversations and connecting with you, and I feel like this was just another one of those conversations that we got on camera and on a podcast now. So it's great.
Yeah.
I didn't get to ask you the question, so that's a little bit different now. Maybe. But what you're doing is amazing, and it's the feeling is mutual. So thank you very much.